Let me tell you a story about my friend James Nyika. 20 years ago, he had to flee on foot from his country of South Sudan because a civil war broke out and threatened his life. He walked across the border to Ethiopia, where he spent the next 4 years going from place to place, sleeping in the desert, near starvation often, and hiding from bandits in the night. Well, he finally made it to another country, the country of Kenya, where he got to the capital city of Nairobi. And in the slums of Nairobi, with other refugees, he searched from house to house, place to place, for anybody that he knew that might be able to help him. Again, on the brink of starvation, someone said to him, "James, I think there's a Sudanese that lives across the way at that house over there in the distance. Why don't you go over there and knock on the door?" And James mustered up the last bit of strength that he had, and as he walked up to the door, not knowing what to expect, when the door opened, his brother-in-law opened it, and with eyes wide open and a smile across his face, he said, "James, we thought you were dead." And through James's tears and his joy, he could see his sister running to him with open arms. Well, that night, they wept, they laughed, they ate. James was finally home after 4 years of wandering. At the end of the evening, his brother took him to a small room in the back of the house, and as he opened the door, James could see a foam mattress on the ground. His brother said, "James, this is your room. This is your home." And as he closed the door and left James sitting there on the mattress with a full stomach and a heart filled with joy, James wept that his life had been spared. Well, not long after that, James heard the gospel from his brother and his sister. He had not experienced Jesus Christ up until this point because the gospel was not common in his world. But his brother and sister had become believers, and they lived out Christianity before him, and they spoke to him about forgiveness and what Jesus Christ came on this earth to do for him. James gave his heart to the Lord that day. I met him a few months later. He was filled with the Spirit, and immediately we connected. There was a fellowship there that was unique. So my wife and I and the other American missionaries prayed and invited James to become part of our group. We were moving to a refugee camp to minister to his people, and James came with us. Well, the next 4 years, James was indispensable in our ministry, but he thought of himself as a simple man that would not go beyond just driving the vehicle or helping build a building or do whatever was practical. I said to him, "James, we're starting a Bible college, and I really feel that God wants you to join our college and to be a part of our students." And he said, "Rob, God can't use me. I'm too simple. Let me just continue to do what I'm doing." Well, James reluctantly joined our college. By the end of that 2 years in school, James realized that God's been using foolish people since the beginning of time. We taught him about Moses and about Noah and about these men in the Old Testament that were fools for God. We taught him about Peter and James and John, these simple fishermen that just simply believed Jesus and stepped out and God did miracles. Well, James came to me at the end of the school and he said, "Rob, God has taught me through you Americans that he can use anybody." And I said, "James, I don't understand." And he said, "Well, you guys don't have a clue about culture. You don't have a clue about the language. You stumble around and do all kinds of things wrong every day. But because you trust God, he uses you and miracles have happened. I want to do the same thing, but I want to go back into the war-torn country of South Sudan, and I want to find people that have never heard the gospel, that are still wandering through the desert, and I want to bring them Jesus through my own hands and my own feet." Well, today, James Nyika leads a group of national missionaries that are ministering to over 1 million unreached souls in South Sudan. Recently, James went back to Ethiopia, where he spent those 4 terrible years, to visit, to speak at a missionary conference. And as he stood before other African missionaries just like himself, he pulled a small coin out of his pocket. And he said, "I've been holding this coin in my pocket for 20 years to remind me that God spared my life through my wanderings in Ethiopia. This coin is a testimony of God's faithfulness." And then James leaned forward and he put that coin in the offering box and he said, "Let this be the seed to the Great Commission being fulfilled in Ethiopia with African missionaries." I want to tell you today that God wants to use you. God's used myself and my friends and my family. God has used men like James Nyika and is continuing to use them. All of us at Ends of the Earth Ministries want to encourage you to listen to the Lord, to ask him what his will is for your life, and no matter what he says, no matter how inadequate you feel, no matter how foolish you know you are, step out and believe God. Believe him to do great things. William Carey once said, expect God to do radical things and step out and attempt radical things for God. So from all of us at Ends of the Earth Ministries, trust the Lord, step out, and see what he will do in your life.